Hey, glad to have you aboard again for another math video here at Math Rocks with Mr. Cox. This video is all about functions. So what is a function will be discussed. Here's an example of three of them. F of x equals 3x plus 8. G of x equals 4x squared minus 2x plus 1. And of course, h of x equals square root of x plus 5. So we'll be discussing what functions are, but also how to evaluate them. So it might be find f of negative 5, or perhaps find x if h of x equals 8. So if you want to find out how this all works, stick around. Let's get it on. Let's go ahead now and talk about what a function is and also what it's not. So we're so used to, when looking at functions, to have, equations. Equations like this: y equals 2x minus 5. And that's kind of what you're first exposed to when you first start doing algebra. But we're going to change it into a function. And really, these two equations right here are basically the same. Rather than saying y, we just say f of x. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do we do that? We do that because it's easier to talk about the functions in a way. So now, rather than saying another equation is y equals x squared minus 5x, by using different letters over here, we have f, g, and h. It's a little more easy to tell exactly which equation we're talking about rather than just saying y equals something. And so we pronounce this, by the way, as f, and then the word of, and then x. So that would be f of x, that would be g of x, that would be h of x. And by the way, that does not mean f times x or g times x. It's just a different way of writing out y. So once you know that, the first thing you're going to be asked to do all the time is evaluate them. And so when you see this kind of question, find f of 4, what that means is, x equals 4, and then go ahead and then plug it into the f equation. Well, the f equation says 2x minus 5, so literally what you're going to do is you're going to say 2 times 4 minus 5. Therefore, 2 times 4 would be 8, and 8 minus 5, of course, is 3. So the answer here is 3. Likewise on this one over here, h of negative 4. Well, you find the h equation, which is right here, and wherever you see an x, you're going to plug in a negative 4. So I would do this 7 plus absolute value 2 times negative 4. Well, 2 times negative 4 is negative 8, so I'm going to say 7 plus the absolute value of negative 8. And we know the absolute value of a negative number is positive, so this becomes 7 plus 8, and that becomes 15. So h of negative 4 is 15. And then finally over here, let's go ahead and do the last one, g of negative 2. That means we're going to plug in a value of negative 2 into this equation. So we're going to take negative 2, and then we're going to square it. Notice I'm putting parentheses around the negative 2 because we're squaring the negative 2. And then it's going to be negative 5 times negative 2. If we take negative 2 and square it, we will get 4. And negative 5 times negative 2 is 10. And as you know, 4 plus 10 is 14. So the answer here would be 14. The other thing we can do is we can kind of reverse this here. So in this case, we have find x if g of x equals 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the equation g of x, and wherever we see a g of x, we're going to replace it with a 6. So this is now going to become a 6. So we're going to say 6 equals x squared minus 5x. Then we're going to need to factor this. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, subtract 6, subtract 6. So I get 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 6. Now, there are different techniques for factoring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say to myself, hey, what multiplies to be negative 6 and adds up to be negative 5? So to do that, the answers, therefore, would be a negative 6 and a positive 1. Those would multiply to be negative 6 and add up to be negative 5. So I'm going to say 0 equals x minus 6 in parentheses and then times x plus 1. And then we can set each one of these equal to 0. So therefore, our answer here is 6. And then our answer over here is negative 1. So in this case, there's actually two answers for what x is, not just one. X is 6 and x equals negative 1. Likewise, over here, I'm going to need to do the same kind of logic. So I'm going to find the h equation and I'm going to plug in a 13. So up here, I'm going to replace it with a 13. So now we have 13 equals 7 plus the absolute value of 2x. I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides, so subtract 7, subtract 7. And I'm just going to go ahead and reverse what side of the equation each one is here. So I'm going to get absolute value of 2x. And then I have my 13 minus my 7. 13 minus 7 is 6. And how we handle absolute value is we know whatever's inside here, we're going to say, hey, whatever's inside here must be 6 or negative 6. So that means whatever's inside is either 6, or we can say whatever's inside the absolute value is equal to negative 6. When we divide by 2 on the first one, we get x equals 3. And over here, when we divide by 2 on both sides, we get x equals negative 3. So there's actually two answers again for this. There's not always two answers, but a lot of times there is. And so that would be our answer for find x if h of x equals 13. As always, if you like what you see, please like, comment, or subscribe. Thank you, and now back to part 2. Finally, one last thing we can do is we can actually use, instead of an equation, we can actually use a graph. So this is some sort of absolute value graph over here, and it is upside down, and the actual vertex has been moved up here to negative 2 comma 5. So on the first one here, it says find f of negative 4. What that means is x equals 4. So when that's true, we have to ask ourselves, what would y equal? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and find x equals 4. That would be right here. And at that point, I'm going to go up and down until I see where it intersects. So it intersects right over here. And so if x equals 4, y at that point where it crosses the x equals 4 line would be a negative 1. So our answer here is negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and change colors here. Well, what about this one, f of negative 3? Well, along the axis here, I'm going to get x equals negative 3 is right here. This time I'm going to go up, and it's going to intersect right there. And I have to ask myself, well, what's y at that position? So when x is negative 3, what is y? Well, y appears to be 4. So our answer here is 4. Then, of course, we can turn it around. Well, what if f of x equals 1? What would x be? Well, f of x is synonymous with y. So in this case, we're saying, hey, when y equals 1, what the heck is x? So I'm going to find y equals 1. That would be right here on the y-axis. And it actually, if I go over and cross here, and I can also cross over here, when y equals 1, x is two different things. So in this case here, x is actually two different answers. X is negative 6 here, and x is positive 2 over here. So x is negative 6, and it's also a positive 2. And then for our last one here, once again, f of x is synonymous with y. So we're saying, hey, when y is 5, what is x? So y equals 5 would be up here on the y-axis. I'm going to go over and it crosses right here. And it only crosses once, so where that crosses, x would actually be negative 2. So our answer here is x equals negative 2. So there you have it. That's everything you need to know about functions and how to evaluate them.